Welcome to Bat Therapy, psychology of Batman, superheroes, and other comic book characters. Be a fly on the wall or a bat in the cave, listening in on a friendship built out of a love for talking Batman, comics, and the everyday struggle to achieve mental health and happiness.
We are your hosts, clinical psychologist Dr. Amelia Brown and educator and comic aficionado Keaton Hopkins. Don't forget to follow us on YouTube and social media and find our Patreon at patreon.com/battherapy.
This podcast is about providing education and understanding and is not a replacement for mental health treatment or support. If you're needing help, go to bat-therapy.com for resources. Hey, Bat Therapy listeners. So we are actually between seasons 4 and 5, but lucky for you, Bill actually found some behind-the-scenes stuff that was enough for us to plug us some behind-the-scenes content just to hold you over while we prep for the next season. So while you wait for season 5 Heroes in Training, here's some behind the scenes. Hope you enjoy it. And if you do enjoy it, then we definitely encourage you to check out our Patreon because we're going to put up a bunch of behind the scenes stuff. It's not the bulk of our psychology, but it's a lot of fun and, us just enjoying ourselves. You can check that out at patreon.com/battherapy. Hope you enjoy. All right. I was writing this one as reading a comic book, but I might have to rename it to stop and smell the comics. Thank you so much for joining us. When Keaton sent me kind of your list of things that you were thinking of bringing up, I was like, "Oh, this is gonna be fun." I love talking to people who just know all sorts of things that I don't know.
And there's a character I didn't bring up that I would love to talk about it later on. The one called Condorito. Because that is a comic book that comes from Chile. It's been since 1943. To this day, I don't know how parents let their kids read it.
Oh, really?
Yes, is such like a funny book, but has so much sexual innuendo.
Oh, wow.
And the characters are drawn, like especially female characters, like very voluptuous.
Oh, no.
Yeah, and me and my friends were talking about that the other day because it's one that is still sold at grocery stores in Puerto Rico, and the character is big. It's one of the biggest in Latin America.
Yeah.
But the up until the 90s, which is when I last read the book, is very sexual in some strips. Kind of like a collection of comic book strips made into a comic book, and some pages are just fun, kind of like physical comedy, and
Yeah.
the other ones are very sexual innuendo comedy.
So, yeah, that was one of the things too that I was thinking about where because when I was reading up on some of the things you had brought up, I was also seeing things where it's like what's offensive here
That is,
versus what's offensive
yeah.
somewhere
I was
else.
telling him, Keaton, about that early on, especially Memín, the one from Mexico.
Oh, my goodness.
Yes, I think that's the one I was reading
Yeah.
about specifically
my
when that
God.
came up.
Oh,
I
no.
explained to him, like, when you see the character first time, he's drawn in the very stereotypical way that Black characters were drawn in the 40s.
Yep.
And
Yeah.
even before that. And that kind of went away in the 50s, but that comic book went through that and still to this day being published that same way.
Yeah. Well, and it's tricky. So, I mean, intent clearly matters for certain things. And then also at the same time, if you're being offensive, even if you don't intend to, but then also the histories are completely different.
Yeah.
The history of our country here versus the history of, say, Mexico. And so it makes sense that certain things might be offensive to people in one place and not another. And then
Not saying that is right, because a lot of other places in Latin America have found the comic book offensive, especially because, like I said early on, like people will use the character's name as a nickname for a Black guy.
uh,
And It's offensive.
Yikes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yikes.
Yeah.
There's a point where it's crossing the line. You're looking like, oh, you
Yeah.
look like that character. Like, it's offensive.
Yeah. Yeah.
But the original intent of the character in Mexico was to show poverty and like the complexities of a black Mexican growing up in Mexico during different types of government.
Yeah. Mm.
So, yeah, it's complicated.
Wow.
It is. All these things are complicated, and it just makes me even more so just respect having a leg in multiple cultures. So like my mom, she was the first generation born here. Her parents were from the former Yugoslavia. And she always talked about never really feeling like she belonged anywhere. And I think part of it was kind of this like certain things make sense at home and then certain things
Yeah.
make sense outside of the home. And so what makes sense for you? Because you are in both those places. And yeah, I think some of this stuff is just super complicated.
It's it's complex. I always tell people this is not a black and white thing. It's very complex. Racism still happen. I had
Oh
a
yeah.
incident uh, just several months ago where I call an accountant to schedule an appointment because I need an accountant for a store. And as soon as I said my name, she hung up on me.
Are you
Yeah, and
serious?
she was referred like I was referred to her, and I call again, and the answering machine came on. I started leaving my message, and he cut off.
Wow.
So I had a white friend of mine call, and she answered quickly and
Oh my
started talking.
goodness.
And then my wife called, and
Oh,
like
wow.
more or less the same thing. And
That's
yeah,
horrible.
and it was kind of like, oh, I see what is going on.
Wow.
Wow.
2023.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. I
Another
mean,
another thing that I was gonna say, like different cultures, how they react to comic books.
Mhm.
So, Gwen Stacy died. I remember just when I saw that, Gwen Stacy, one of the big stories in Spider-Man is Gwen Stacy, Peter Parker's girlfriend, she dies.
Mhm.
She's killed
yeah.
by the Green Goblin or Spider-Man, depending on the where you look at it.
Mhm.
And in Mexico, they hated that. They
Hmm.
hated the idea of Gwen Stacy dying. So from issue 124, 25 on, they changed the story.
They
And they
they could
did,
do that?
yeah, they just started doing their own Spider-Man comic book. And the Spider-Man comic book, Peter and Gwen end up marrying.
What?
Wait. There's an alternate Spider-Man, and
Mexico.
this is in Mexico, where Gwen Stacy never dies.
No.
Huh.
And it's because they
Wow.
didn't tolerate that she was killed.
I
Huh.
wow. That's is this still ongoing? Or
No, it
oh,
stopped in
okay.
like after 20, 30 issues. And I think Marvel caught wind of it and they said, you guys,
Cease and
stop.
desist.
Yeah. It's not part of the deal.
Disney would have caught it quicker.
Yeah, it's like they didn't like the thing is that they will license the comic book over there. They will send it to editorial to get translated in Spanish. Once the death came about, the letters they received were all like, "I'm canceling the book. I'm not gonna buy the book anymore." Like
Wow.
whatever, and in fear that they're not gonna sell the book, they just started doing their own Spider-Man story,
Wow.
and it is on eBay. Like right now, those books from Mexico are worth thousands of dollars.
I was about to say, yeah, like
People have been asking Marvel translate in English. Have this as an alternate
yeah,
story.
it's the
Just
first
Yeah.
multiverse. Like,
yeah,
yeah, the first what if. That's
but it's
yeah.
how cultures
Wow.
react to stories.
Spider-Man's gone
Yeah.
through some interesting ones because I've watched a few episodes of the Japanese live action Spider-Man show where he has a giant robot that transforms into a leopard. Like It's a whole thing. It's really it's a lot.
Incredible.
It's a lot. It's great.
Every country reacts very different to how things happen in comic books.
Mm.
But Mexico has been the one to put the money where the mouth is.
Oh no, this is not happening. Not
It's
here.
not happening.
Not today. Oh, I love that. That's great.
I love how it took a while for Marvel to be like, wait a minute.
Wait. What's happening there?
The other thing too. So at one point in the 70s, they were releasing Sergeant Fury and he has Howling Commandos.
Mhm.
By the time in the US it hit around issue 100, they started doing reprints of the early issues. Mexico said, no, we're not going to do reprints. And they started doing their own stories. And those stories are now very popular.
Wow. It's funny because like I teach like middle and high schoolers now, and it's really funny talking to them about comic books because their Nick Fury has and always
Been-
has been an African American that
Yep.
looked like Samuel L. Jackson. Like
That might also just be my Nick Fury too, because I
Yeah.
didn't know his character.
oh gosh,
before.
I remember White Nick Fury. I remember David Hasselhoff Nick Fury. Not a
Oh.
good
Oh,
movie.
wow.
Not a good movie at all.
No.
That sounds like something I just have to watch though.
You
'cause
gotta
it's
Oh, you
that
got to.
yeah,
bad.
you-
You have to get it on YouTube or something.
Yeah.
I remember it was a Best Buy exclusive,
Oh my goodness.
and I bought it for like $15. It was so bad
It's so bad.
that I wanted to sell it, and I sold it on eBay like for $500. And I'm like, let me go get more.
Had to be to a German. Had to be to someone in Germany. Germans love that man.
Yeah.
So
They
much.
really do. So when I was in Germany, this was, oh man, almost 20 years ago now. But I saw a random wall and someone had spray painted David Hasselhoff on it and it said David Hasselhoff saved us from communism.
Yeah.
It was just a random wall in Berlin.
Love it. Yeah, it's great. But yeah, it's funny like how generations like
Generations for sure. Yeah.
generational changes are so different. Another one, and this happened today. I was talking to my students about cereal, and I mentioned Fruity Pebbles, and they didn't know. They knew Fruity Pebbles and they loved Fruity Pebbles, but they had no idea who the Flintstones were. They were just like, "Oh yeah, the caveman
Yeah.
on the front of the
What?
box."
Yeah.
And I realized, I'm
No.
like, wait, how would they know? Like, unless they have Boomerang, which no one does anymore, right? Like, but they wouldn't know anything about the
Oh, wow.
Flintstones. Like, yeah,
Huh.
they knew Fruity Pebbles and how they're cavemen on the front of the box, but I'm like, no, that caveman family was around long before the cereal. Like, I feel so old right now, but this is no.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's crazy. It's wow.
The only character from Hanna-Barbera that has kept through generations is Scooby-Doo.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Everybody else, kind of like up to the 90s, that was it.
Mhm.
And because of Cartoon Network, people were watching early on those reruns. But now it's for the MeTV generation, the
Yeah.
people who are like
Yeah.
40 and up that get MeTV and they watch it on Sundays and in the morning. The same
Yep.
with the Jetsons.
Yeah.
You
Oh,
mentioned
the
those characters. I went to Universal Studios and they used
Still
to
never
have
been.
the
Always want to
Jetsons
go.
ride, the Hanna-Barbera ride. And I showed that to one of my nieces, and they're, who? Like
Aw.
Jetsons. And I showed them the ride. I had to go to YouTube and show them the ride. Oh, there's Scooby-Doo and the Mystery Gang. Nobody else. They couldn't recognize anybody else.
Wow.
Yeah.
Amelia, did we make a folder for this one?
Oh, I forgot to turn off my recording. Let me see. Thanks for nerding out with us. I'm clinical psychologist Dr. Amelia Brown.
And I'm educator and comic aficionado Keaton Hopkins. Check out my TV and movie reviews on YouTube at Team JVS. Check out our website at bat-therapy.com. our Bat Therapy YouTube channel, and follow us on social media. And don't forget our Patreon page at patreon.com/battherapy. See you next week. Same bat time, same bat channel.